What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Catfish on Ice, episode 234. Had a little bit of a break, but we are back. It's your host, Chad Minton, with co-host Max Greenberg. Max, how you been, man?
I'm pretty good. How about you, Chad?
Hanging in there, man. Life has been full of surprises and changes.
Yep.
For the people who might follow me, got a new dog now, just bought a new house, have a new car. It's new everything.
Yep.
Only thing that's missing is that the Preds aren't playing hockey in June. That's about the only thing.
Hey, but we got this offseason, though, it's about to be crazy.
It is. Yeah. It's almost like as exciting as this Stanley Cup Final matchup is going to be, you can't ask for a better matchup. Oilers, Panthers, it's going to be fun. It's going to be an entertaining matchup. But I almost want to get it over with so that we can start seeing the dominoes fall in the offseason.
Well, I saw, and I linked it, I believe, in an article I wrote for today at Predlines. Frank Saravalli, who's an NHL insider, said we could see activity starting this week.
Oh yeah,
he said particularly Marty Necas, who's going to be traded, is saying that it could happen really soon. So things could ramp up sooner than you think.
They could. So, yeah, let's tell you what we're getting into tonight on Catfish on Ice. Since we've had a few weeks off, we've got a loaded slate of topics to get into. Of course, the Stanley Cup Final is set. Just mentioned Oilers and the Panthers. I think it's a great matchup for the league. I think it's going to have a lot of eyes on it. I don't know if you saw it, Max, but this has been the best ratings for the playoffs.
I have been noticing that.
Through the first three rounds since 1996.
Big deal.
And let me see if I can actually find. And of course, with the team from Canada being in there, you got the world's best player in Connor McDavid in there. I mean, the league's happy about it.
Maybe the best duo in the league, maybe in the league's history in a long time, in the finals this year.
So yeah, the best rating since 1996. So that's good for the league. We've been waiting for Connor McDavid to finally make it to the Stanley Cup Final. He's in there. He's got a great, but of course the Panthers are legit. I mean, this is their second straight Stanley Cup Final appearance.
That's hard to do. That is really hard to do.
And the path they took, well, I'll save it for later because we're gonna debate a certain topic in the opening face-off. We always get ahead of ourselves, especially when we take a couple weeks off because me and Max are just so ready to go because we've been bottling all this up for so long. But yeah, we're gonna do that. Of course, this is what sparked my idea on this next topic. Joe Pavelski, such a respected player. He's going to hang him up. Whether you like some of the teams he played for, it doesn't matter. Such a well-respected, great player. It sucks to see him hang up the skates. Never got a Stanley Cup. Got so close this year with that Dallas Stars team. A team that I predicted in my bracket to make it to the Cup Final and lose to the Rangers. So I got my conference finals picks right, but they did not make the extra win for my bracket. But either way, it sparked my idea of course, best players to never win a Stanley Cup. And I've got a few on this list that have a little bit of a Preds connection. But of course, Connor McDavid is the biggest one. Until he wins that Stanley Cup, he will always obviously be the best player ever to not have a cup. But his story is nowhere close to being finished, to being written, and he might break that drought. And, of course, it's kind of crazy, man. I mean, we know that Canada hasn't won a Stanley Cup since the early 90s, a team from Canada. But this is also a team from Canada's first appearance in the Stanley Cup since the last time the Oilers were in it in 2006.
I thought the Montreal Canadiens made it a few years ago. I mean, granted, that was in a weird year, but
I think they were just talking about full 82-game seasons, not the COVID bubble.
Fair enough. Okay.
I know Sportsnet shared it, so I'll put it on the screen. So 2006 was when the Oilers made it. Okay, so there have been other teams who have made it since then, but the Oilers were 2006.
What year did Ottawa make it?
Ottawa made it in 2007, the year after. So only five teams. This is the Oilers. It's the fifth time since 2006 that a team from Canada has made the Cup Final. Only 5 times since 2006.
Yep,
that's pretty crazy.
Wow. It's crazy.
So we're gonna preview the Stanley Cup Final. Who we think is gonna win? Who's the bigger surprise team out of the Oilers or the Panthers to make it? We're gonna look at those players who have never won a Stanley Cup, some of the best players ever. Then we'll get into our Preds talk. We're going to do our player grades for the year, but we're going to do it in tiers. So we're going to do it in A's, B's, C's. We're not going to go to each player and spend 20, 30 minutes on each player. We did in years past because that just, quite frankly, that took way too long. So we're going to do a short, condensed version of how we think the team did based on who got the A's, who got the B's. We'll run through the list. I think it's fair to say, Max, we'll save the suspense. No one on the team got an F, right?
No, not in my book.
I mean, when you talk about a Predators team that completely overperformed compared to what they were expected to do, I think it would be very unfair to give anybody an F on this team.
Especially, with how, Andrew Brunette being, Coach of the Year nominee, having the impact he did on the players this year. Yeah, nobody got – I mean, I'll give this late. Nobody even for me got a D.
No, yeah, I think this team had that motto of everybody chipping in, everyone doing what they had to do.
Absolutely.
And I think Andrew Brunette milked everything he could possibly milk out of this team.
Oh, yeah. He got every ounce of what he could out of the talent on this roster.
Yeah. Well, we will we'll at least break it down on we'll go into depth on some of these players and just what it meant to the season and where we put them. Me and Max did share each other's list, and we were pretty much on the same page. There's a couple that I disagreed with, but we'll get into it.
Yep.
Also, looking at the prospect pipeline, that prospect pipeline for the Preds that keeps getting better and better. Of course, we know the Admirals are in the conference finals right now and going up against Coachella Valley. And, of course, there's so many outstanding prospects that are just tearing it up for the Admirals right now. And so that got me thinking, who are some of the prospects who have a good chance to make their NHL debut in 2024-25? Of course, this past year, there was only one prospect who made their NHL debut, and that was Mark Del Gaizo, who looked really good.
Yep.
So let's see if I'm sure there's at least one, maybe two, maybe more than that next year, prospects who might make their NHL debut for the Preds. Of course, a lot of that hinges on what the Predators decide to do with their veteran free agents. And if they bring them back, what do they do in the trade market? Of course, all that matters when it comes to what type of talent we're going to see play on the NHL level out of the prospect pool. But we'll put the crystal ball out and try to figure that out. We'll round out episode 234 with looking back at the most impressive wins this past year for the Predators. There were a lot of good wins to choose from. One thing you will say about the Predators is their resume in terms of beating some really good teams this year definitely happened, including the two teams that are in the Stanley Cup Final. They beat both of those teams.
Yeah, they sure did.
So with that said, Max, let's get into it. I want to ask you straight off the rip here when it comes to this matchup. Who is the bigger surprise team to make it to the Cup Final, in your opinion? Is it a bigger surprise to see the Oilers there, or is it a bigger surprise to see the Panthers there?
I don't think it's a really big surprise to see either team, honestly. My answer is going to be kind of complicated. I'm going to say the Panthers only because the fact that the odds were stacked so high against them making the finals last year, the fact that people say how hard it is to get there in the first place, but to do it again, it's crazy. Like, you see why so few teams rarely repeat as Stanley Cup champions, so few teams repeat Cup Finals appearances, all this stuff, and to see a team like the Panthers do it, especially after last year, because a lot of people, including myself, are saying, look, that could have been a fluke run. You don't know how they're going to do in the regular season again. Does Bobrovsky play the way he did last year's playoffs? There were so many unknowns for them, but they proved how legit they are. So yeah, I would say just, based off, what they were going up against, including just the odds, I think it's pretty surprising the Panthers made it back again, even though they have a really, really good team.
I would say the bigger surprise for me is the Panthers, not because I thought they were a bad team at all, just because, first of all, you look at the path that the Panthers had to take compared to the Oilers. And I know making it to the Stanley Cup Final, it's not easy no matter what path you take. But look at the Panthers. They knock out the Lightning in 5. Pretty impressive, even though we know the Lightning aren't the same Lightning team they were in the Dynasty years. That's still impressive to knock that team out in 5 games. Made quick work of the Lightning.
Yeah, it was not close.
Round 2, I thought for sure the Bruins would take out the Panthers. I thought that would have been where the Bruins take over and win that series, but the Panthers knock them out in 6. Didn't even take 7 games. Nope. And then you look at this past series against the Rangers. They were down 2-1 in that series. And then they rallied, and then they won 3 in a row to win that series 4-2. and held the range in those 3 wins. They held the Rangers to 2 goals or less. That Rangers team is loaded with offense. And the fact that the Panthers are a great defensive team. They're not just loaded with offensive weapons. They're a good defensive team. And they've got Bobrovsky in net, who is putting up great numbers. I got some notes here for this series that I just want to share. First of all, did you see the really cool thing that happened in the Dallas series? I'm going to put it on the screen right now. So everyone remembers the story of Ben Stelter, who was a big part of the Oilers team, came to the locker room, and I guess a radio DJ in Dallas kind of like just had a screw up moment where he said something, but you look at the tweet there and you see about what happened, and to troll the Oilers after Game 2. But after learning of the song's meaning to Joey Moss and Ben Stelter, the DJ apologized, donated to the Ben Stelter Foundation, encouraged Stars fans to do the same. And I don't know if you saw, but
I didn't know, but that's really cool.
The Stars fans absolutely showed up and just donated so much to that foundation. And it just goes to show you that in a lot of ways, sports ends up being so much bigger than just what happens on the ice. It's stuff like that you see that just really warms your heart and makes you feel good about what we're doing here. So that was cool. Really love to see that.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah. Let's look at some other series notes here. Edmonton is let's see. They are the 5th team again since 2006 to reach the Stanley Cup Final from Canada. You look at Florida, it's their 3rd Stanley Cup Final appearance. They're 0-2, but this is their 2nd straight appearance, whereas Edmonton, this is their 8th Stanley Cup appearance. They've won 5 Stanley Cups. They had a long stretch of winning hockey there, but it's their first appearance since 2006. Let's look at some players here. Of course, Connor McDavid leads the Stanley Cup playoffs. No surprise there. In points with 31 and assists 26. And Edmonton has the top 4 playoff point scorers in these playoffs. McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, and Nugent Hopkins. So that's pretty amazing right there in itself. Go ahead. Yeah, Matthew.
I was just saying, yeah, I agree with you.
when you look at Florida, Matthew Tkachuk's leading their team in playoff points with 19. I would say Florida's the better defensive team for sure.
Yep,
they've got the better goaltending.
By a long shot.
But of course, Edmonton's got more weapons. They've got more firepower.
I would say Edmonton definitely has the better top end talented players, especially on offense. But Florida's definitely Edmonton, I would say, is really kind of top heavy. Florida's more well rounded everywhere, is what I would say.
Yes, I would agree. I look at that's going to be really the overall X factor of how this series begins. Is do you see a more defensive style game, or do you see the Oilers take over with their top end talent, like you just mentioned, Max? It's going to be, I'm sure it'll be an ebbs and flow type of series. But another thing, it's no secret, when you feast on the power play, when you excel at special teams in the playoffs, you're going to go really far. And so it's no surprise that both of these teams have done really well on special teams in the playoffs. So you look at it here, Edmonton has the best power play in the playoffs, and they have the best penalty kill in these playoffs. They're scoring at a 37.3% success rate on the power play, and they have a 93.9% success rate on the penalty kill.
Yeah.
So
pretty insane right there. I mean, whenever your special teams are clicking, it's going to be hard to beat you, and they've been consistent all playoffs. So yeah, that's a huge.
You look at Florida, not to be outdone. They're doing very well on special teams as well. They are 4th in the playoffs on power play percentage at 23.3. And just to kind of sadly remind us how bad Nashville did in the power play in that first round series, they were 9.1%. So yikes. When you look at these two teams.
Are you saying Florida's been that 9.1 the whole playoffs, or just the series against?
No. The Preds were 9.1% on the power play. So I'm doing an ugly comparison of just how bad. Yeah. And then, like I said, Edmonton's got the best penalty kill in the playoffs. Florida's got the 2nd best penalty kill in these playoffs. So your best 2 penalty kills in the playoffs are going up against each other. So that's a pretty interesting little side note. Again, I think the difference in this series that can tilt it Florida's way is going to be Sergei Bobrovsky for sure. I mean, he's having a great. He's been there. He's done that. He is the more tested goaltender. He's the more trusted goaltender in this situation compared to Stuart Skinner, who I think Stuart Skinner's been good enough, obviously, to get the Oilers where they're at. I'm not saying he's been a scrub at all. He's got decent numbers, but am I going to trust Stuart Skinner in this situation over Sergei Bobrovsky? Not even close. No. Not even close.
And do you want me? I have some thoughts, but do you want me to go ahead and give my prediction with it?
Go ahead. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think also a big thing to watch, and it's going to be different from the Dallas series, is the physicality of Florida. And one thing I say is, go back to Edmonton series against Vancouver. Edmonton's a much better team than Vancouver on paper, and they eventually won that series in 7 games. But I think I would maintain a big part of, what got Vancouver that far in that series, was the physicality. Their physicality. We saw it in the series against us. It was a huge, heavy-hitting series. They brought that same thing against Edmonton, and I would say it definitely stymied Edmonton a little bit. But I look at, a team like Florida, they're a much better team than Vancouver, every bit as physical. And I think with that being there, the Oilers, as top-heavy as they are, the Panthers are well-rounded. I think Florida's going to win this series, honestly, in 5 or 6 games.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You got Florida in 5 or 6.
I think it's going to be a fairly quick series, honestly.
Wow. Man, going out on a limb there. I respect it.
And also, like you said, they have such an advantage in that.
Yeah, they do. But I'm actually going to go the other way. I got the Oilers, and I really would love for this to happen. This would be just perfect, just like sports gold if this happened. But I'm going to take Oilers in 7.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
Oilers in 7. Connor McDavid gets his first Stanley Cup in Game 7, game-winning fashion. I just think that you mentioned it, the top-end talent. I think this is the time, and it's not just Connor McDavid. I mean, this team is loaded with clutch players. Not that Florida isn't as well, but I mean, the overwhelming – I think they're going to be able to do just enough to, even if Bobrovsky's great in this series and he outperforms Stuart Skinner, I still think it's going to be too much for even him to handle. And the Oilers are going to do what they do on the power play. They're going to do what they do with, I mean, did you see that ridiculous goal Connor McDavid scored where he just basically diced his way? I mean, he did things that that no human should be able to do on ice skates. It's like, it's just crazy to watch him. So I just feel like it's his time. His time is now. His time has come. It's probably taken a little bit longer than people would have expected, but his time has come. He's going to get that first cup. But I got this going 7 because I got a lot of respect for the Panthers. I got a lot of respect for Bobrovsky. I got a lot of respect for their coach, Paul Maurice. They play the game the right way. They're fundamentally sound. They don't beat themselves. So that's why I'm still giving them the benefit of the doubt that this goes 7. But I'm sticking with the Oilers. And it's not, like I said, it's not just McDavid. You've got Draisaitl out there, of course. You've got Bouchard. You've got Nugent Hopkins. You've got Zach Hyman, who is one of the top goal scorers in these playoffs. You've got our guy, Matthias Ekholm. I mean, how cool would it be to see him win a Stanley Cup? He deserves it. So just a lot to love about this series. A lot to love about this series from both sides. It should be an outstanding series. I really hope your prediction's not right and it goes in 5. I would be really disappointed.
Yeah, I don't want to go in 5. And obviously I know McDavid, McDavid, Draisaitl, I know what those top end guys are capable of. But it's a team game, and knowing Edmonton, again they're pretty top heavy outside of their best players. And again, I just think seeing them they almost lost to Vancouver, who, again, no disrespect to Vancouver, and I know they beat us, but they're not on the caliber of team that Florida is. And Florida plays a similar way. I just can't see Edmonton as a team overcoming a physical team in Florida, but also a really, really good team as well.
Hey, man, like I said, I respect you going out on a limb and making that kind of a prediction. I really do. Also, the President's Trophy curse lives on. So look at this from Sportsnet Stats. For the 11th straight season, the President's Trophy winner will not win the Stanley Cup.
I mean, they got farther than most do, in fairness.
In fairness, yes. But, I mean, wow. I mean, why does anyone care about the President's Trophy anymore? I mean, that's just an all-time curse right there. But yeah. All right. So Max has got the Panthers in 5 or 6. I got the Oilers in 7 in epic fashion. I think it's going to be set up to be one of the better Stanley Cup finals we've seen in a while. So we'll see what happens with that.
I hope you're right. I hope it goes 7 games, but I personally don't think that's going to happen.
Game 1 is set for June the 8th, this Saturday, and it will be at Florida. Have you seen the ticket prices for Game 1 in Sunrise, Florida? I mean, the cheapest tickets were like $1,200. At least the ticket app I was looking at.
How? You kind of cut out there. What did you say it was?
Oh, I was saying like the ticket prices for Game 1 again with the Panthers hosting or whatever is. I mean, these ticket prices are insane. They're like $700, $800, $900, $1,000 cheapest.
Oh wow, $800 cheapest.
Yeah, could not believe it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you want to see Connor McDavid play in the Stanley Cup Final? Then you got to fork out the cash, apparently.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right, so let's move along here. We are presented by DraftKings, part of the Hockey Podcast Network. This is episode 234 of Catfish on Ice with Chad Minton and Max Greenberg. Let's look at the best players to never win a Stanley Cup. Of course, Joe Pavelski is what sparked this as he announced his retirement. Really emotional stuff there. I know it's hard for Stars fans because, I mean, that dude was the fountain of youth and stuff. But, man, I mean, for that team, they're going to be back next year. I mean, that team's loaded. They're built to win for years to come.
Oh, yeah, they'll be fine.
They'll be fine. But, wow, it's tough to see Pavelski go because he was still – producing at a very high level for his age. So let's look at some other best players to not win a Stanley Cup. Let's start with how about Paul Kariya? 15 seasons in the league, Hall of Famer. Yeah.
Am I listening to your question at the middle of the podcast? Am I buffering in and out because it keeps buffering.
You are freezing. Your screen's freezing a lot. I keep thinking that you're frozen in time.
I might try and move to another room if that's okay because it's cutting in and out a lot.
Yeah, you're kind of you're freezing a lot, man.
Yeah, because I know where I am in our house. I'm not close to the router, so I'm going to try and find a room that I can record and hopefully I know a place where there's I can get closer. I know it's dark in here. Sorry, everyone.
Oh, Max Greenberg's screen went dark. Dude, you look like you're in a tunnel.
We're in scramble mode right here, people. We're in scramble mode.
It looks like you're going through like a haunted house or something right now.
No, yeah, right. it's just my house, right? And my family's house tonight. So, and we just a new house, so we're just figuring out everything. I think this will be much better. We're closer to our router.
You're not cutting out now, man. You're moving smooth now, man.
Oh man, this is
oh my God, we're off the rails. We're off the rails.
We are in full scramble mode, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, before you dropped your laptop on the floor, it was moving really smoothly. I think getting closer to the router really helped a lot. So
no, I think this is definitely better.
Okay, so what I was saying was let's get to the best players to never win a Stanley Cup. Let's tie in some former Preds players to this. Of course, we know Pekka Rinne, right? I mean,
of course, yeah.
I wouldn't call him one of the best ever to not win a Stanley Cup, but he's definitely a player that you would bring up in terms of some of the better goaltenders to never win a Stanley Cup.
Oh yeah, no,
but let's
not above Henrik Lundqvist, who's probably takes the cake.
Let's put him on the list first. Then I was going to go somewhere else with that one, but Henrik Lundqvist, of course, 6th all time in wins with 459. Actually finished with the same career goals against average as Pekka Rinne. They both finished at 2.43 goals against. And I think that we've always said, like, if you put Lundqvist in the Hall of Fame, then you would think that kind of gives you an idea if Pekka would ever get in, because Pekka's whole thing is he never won a Stanley Cup. You can't put him in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
That's been the number one argument against Pekka making the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
But yeah, Henrik Lundqvist is a big one. I brought up Paul Kariya. Yep. Paul Kariya, 15 seasons in the league, a Hall of Famer. Only in those 15 seasons, it's kind of a shame that he only played in one Stanley Cup final, and that was in 2003 with the Ducks, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, they were called at the time.
Yep.
But yeah, he played a short stint with the Preds and put up some outstanding numbers, some that are still way up there in the record books for the Preds. Of course, those years the Preds were not anywhere close to going deep and competing legitimately for Stanley Cups. But when he did play with the Preds for that short amount of time, he was a huge asset to this team. One of the biggest superstars to ever come to this team in those early years of the Preds. So Paul Kariya is a big one for me that's never won a Stanley Cup. How about PK Subban? Never won a Stanley Cup.
That's a big. I think there are definitely better players, on the list of who I was thinking of. I mean, one of them who does have a Preds connection to Phil Housley. Never won.
Yeah, I had him. He was next. Phil Housley, former assistant coach for the Predators, 21-year NHL career. He is fourth highest in NHL history, highest scoring American-born player with 1,232 career points. Trivia question, Max. Can you name the top 3 American-born point scorers of all time?
Top 3 American point scorers of all time?
Yeah. Phil Housley's number 4. I know that's tough.
Pride probably can't.
Well, I really just sprung this on you. I used to do this to Rich. I used to do this to Rich all the time.
This may or may not be way off. Is one of them Patrick Kane?
It is.
Okay.
Good job. He's number 3. Good
That's
job.
Number 3.
Okay, you got to think a little bit further back now, man. Not super far back. We're talking like, I'll give you a hint. Go back 20 years. That's all you got to do. Go back to the 90s. Think about both these players were at the peak pinnacle in the 90s.
Man, I don't know.
You're going to face palm and be like, how did I not know that?
All right.
Mike Modano, number 2.
Okay.
Brett Hull, number 1.
I honestly wouldn't have guessed those. I'm not very versed in like the 90s NHL days. So,
but those 3 guys all got Stanley Cups. Phil Housley doesn't have a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Okay, this guy's more of a goon. A lot of people don't like this guy, but you still can't take away the fact that he was a really, really good player in his time. Jeremy Roenick.
Yep, that's one.
20 seasons in the league. 20 seasons. Played for 5 different teams and never got a Stanley Cup. That's hard. This
is
right
one
there.
from back in the day, but Pavel Bure never got a cup.
Pavel Bure. That was that's probably one of the. You could make a solid argument. He's one of the best to never win a Stanley Cup. If you go back and look at his stuff.
Well, there are 5 household names we haven't said yet that I think everyone's going to be like, who you can just think back. How did they not win cups? And one of them, Patrick Marleau.
Patrick Marleau, yes.
Yep. Joe Thornton never won a cup.
Joe Thornton.
Jerome McGinley never won a cup. And Henrik and Daniel Sedin never won a cup.
I had Henrik Sedin on mine as well.
Yep.
Henrik Sedin played all 17 seasons with the Canucks. 1,070 career points. 830 of those points were assists. That you want to talk about loyalty right there, man. 17 seasons with the same team. You just don't see loyalty like that anymore, really.
No, you don't at all.
In sports, you don't.
But
yeah.
And one of the guys who I think is an interesting one, even though he might be able to live vicariously through his son if he wins it, is Keith Tkachuk.
Yeah. And let's really hope, let's just hope that Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi won't have to go on this list. That they'll eventually get theirs before they hang it up.
You hope so, man.
All right, man. Before we get into our player grades, we got to give our love to DraftKings. DraftKings is back as another sponsor this year for the podcast and for the Hockey Podcast Network. So let's go ahead and tell you about the current offer that's going on to get you ready for the Stanley Cup Final. We're this close to crowning the Stanley Cup champion, and with the action heating up on the ice, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5 and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Okay, I have a puppy in the house, by the way, and I hear her chewing on something. I had to make sure it wasn't something very valuable. Okay, she might get an on-air experience. Be put on camera here in a second if I can get through this ad read first. If your first bet doesn't hit only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPENY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. One no sweat bet per new customer. Issued as one bonus bet based on amount of initial losing bet. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/ICE for eligibility, wagering and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Copyright NHL 2024, all rights reserved. Okay, so you can go ahead and get that. If you're a new DraftKings user, you can go ahead and get that no sweat bet with the code THPN for game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. Go lock that in with that promo code. All right, so I think the dog is chewing on one of my empty water bottles. So I think I can live with that. I thought she was like chewing on something a lot more. It sounded a lot more valuable. I was hearing a lot of crunching and a lot of like destructive noises over there. And now she's under the kitchen table. So, yeah.
She's a puppy. She'll learn. She'll learn eventually.
She's a handful, that's for sure. So I rescued a dog. Her name's Sophia. I've put her on my social media if you want to look her up. She's a sweetheart, but she's also a handful, as most puppies are. I can try to get her on the screen if she'll walk over here. But until then, let's go ahead and get our grades out. And Max, I'm going to put it up on the screen. If I can get it up there. But until we do that, Max, how about you start us off? So we're doing player grades for the Preds, but we're doing it in levels of A, B, C.
Yep.
We don't have any D's or F's. Everyone passed. Everyone passed on this team this year. So no flunks here. But Max, how about you start with our obvious players on the team who got an A?
Yep, I think Chad and I were absolutely in agreement with this. I imagine most people are. Forsberg obviously gets an A. Ryan O'Reilly gets an A. Roman Yossi's going to get an A. Gus Nyquist is going to get an A. So those are your top 4. I guess you never know, but I'm pretty sure most people are going to have those same top 4. Me personally, and this is I think where Chad and I were different. I gave Ryan McDonagh an A as well.
See, I did not. I put McDonagh as a B. I'm a hard grader. But I can see, if we were doing plus minuses, I'd say a B plus. But we haven't even touched on it, Max. We were gone for so long. The Ryan McDonagh trade,
right? Yeah,
we have not even done an episode since then. That's how far behind we are. So before we even really get into our player grades, we got to give our thoughts on that, man.
Yeah, and let me just say, a few weeks ago, and Chad remembers, I actually talked about this as a possibility, and I thought at the time it seemed like a very unpopular take. But I will say, though, knowing that the trade happened, it wasn't the traditional just trade a guy. We did learn that it was a bit of a request from Ryan McDonagh because he wanted to go back to Tampa Bay because that's he has a lot of good memories, as Barry Trotz said, from winning the cup there. That's where he said that he and his wife are going to permanently settle with their whole family, and it was one of those deals where I think that Trotz wanted to do well for the players, and that really says a lot about McDonagh himself and what Trotz thought about McDonagh and how he wants to reward players for their efforts. But me personally, even if the trade request wasn't a thing, I thought I think it's a good move for the Preds because you free up a bunch of cap space, you free up the logjam, and I spoke several times on the logjam on left defense. You get rid of that, which is good, and again you have more cap space to go and get another forward. And again, McDonagh, as great as he was the oldest player on the team. And Barry Trotz said, we're looking to get younger as a team. And I honestly think that it's a smart move for the organization. Maybe Trotz doesn't want to admit that, but who knows? That wasn't part of his decision as well.
Yeah. You clear $6.75 million in cap space. Maybe it wasn't in the game plan originally to do this, but you respect McDonough, like you said, and you send him to where he wants to go play, and you get that extra cap space. That second round pick in 2025, that is a nice piece of the puzzle to get back right there. Really
and
big.
Years ago, you traded for McDonough for virtually nothing. Now you get a second round pick. So it's like you just added a second round pick to your team.
And you look at it from the perspective of the Lightning. Well, that's one of their weakest parts of their team is in their defensive corps. So they get Ryan McDonough back, but for an expensive amount. And he's definitely going to help that team immediately, but they do not have nearly the amount of cap space to work with that the Predators do right now. And they're still trying to figure out how they can get Steven Stamkos to re-sign. Maybe with McDonough in there, it could entice Stamkos to take the team-friendly discount and stick around, which is what I think is going to ultimately happen.
Probably, and it just shows that. And again, and also like there's ways to maneuver. Like they can still sign. Like say they signed Stamkos for like $7 million, had to figure out the remaining $2 million cap space. There's ways you can maneuver and figure out. But when I first saw the McDonough trade, I thought to myself, like they may not be able to sign Stamkos now. But now looking at it, it's like looking at the way of like, if they brought McDonough back, it means they're probably going to be intentional about, keeping the game together. So I think that makes sense. And ultimately, I could see Stamkos taking a hometown discount to say, especially with McDonough being back there.
Well, man, I got to give you props, man. You definitely called it. You definitely, you didn't outright predict it, but you definitely brought up the possibility of it. I remember.
Of course, I didn't predict it would happen the way it happened. And that's another thing people say.
But dude, but I think you're being a little too humble here because I remember the exact moment where I full stop said, let's not even bring up Ryan McDonough.
Right.
I don't want to think about losing him. And then it happened. But you know what? Put your emotions aside. You love the player, but it's ultimately a business, and it is a very smart business move for the Predators and where they're trying to go. Now, it does make the defensive alignment very interesting going into next year.
It definitely makes you worse on paper. You definitely take a hit there.
Well, but you're going to have to shuffle some things around now. Naturally, I wonder, what does that mean for Alexander Carrier? Let's say he's not retained either. I mean, your right side just took a massive blow if you lose McDonough and Carrier, two of your best shot blockers on the team last year.
I definitely think the Preds are going to be in the market for a physical right defenseman.
They're going to have to. Because when you look at their prospect pool, a lot of their prospects are left defensemen. So, like, what are you going to do with Lauzon if Carrier's gone? I would think that Fabro is first in line to play with Yossi because they've already played together so much. And I think Yossi brought out the very best in Fabro. So I would love to see Fabro get that chance again, going into a contract year once again, to play with Yossi on the top pairing. I'm cool with that. I don't even get that freaked out about thinking about that. I like Fabro with Yossi.
No, I think they play really well together.
But the rest of that,
that's absolutely. I think that's absolutely the top pairing until proven otherwise.
And then you expect to see Stastny in there again. But then you wonder, okay, how's the rest of this going to shake out? So that's the only thing I'm thinking about when it comes to McDonough being gone. And then I think about Carrier being an unrestricted free agent. But anyway, we had to touch on that because we hadn't talked about it yet. And when I saw McDonough, I just thought, oh, wow, we haven't even talked about him being traded yet because we've been gone for a few weeks. All right. So, there's our A's. It's pretty obvious. Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist. I mean, it was the most productive top line the Preds have ever had in terms of just straight numbers, the amount of offense they produced together. It was better. It was more productive than the Jofa line was. So you had to give all three of those guys A's because they all three brought out the best in each other as a top line. Didn't necessarily translate to the Canucks series, unfortunately. But at the same time, they get A's from us. And then, of course, Roman Josi had his second most productive offensive year of his career, only behind the 96-point season. So you got to give him an A. Everyone keeps waiting to see if maybe he's going to start regressing. His offense is going to start regressing because he is getting a little bit older. Didn't happen last year, so you got to give him an A. And then Max gives McDonough an A. I would say he's a fringe A, B, but I actually put McDonough as a B on my personal list. Let's go to the other Bs on our player grades for the Preds. Colton Sissons, let's start with him, Max. So I think we've talked about him a lot, but I mean, I think people are underestimating just how important Sissons was for being the glue that kind of held the middle part of the team together. And he's so reliable to be moved wherever you need him to be moved, whether it's center, whether it's wing, whether you want him to play on the second line, whether you want him to play on a tone setting third or fourth line. He just, he's a coach's dream because you can put him wherever you need him, and you know he's going to do his job.
He would be an A if his ceiling as a player, which not trying to pick on him, because this is really, I'm not saying he can really control this. This is the talent he has, but he'd be an A in my book if his talent didn't limit him to being a middle six player at a ceiling.
Yeah, for sure.
Like just the fact that he is mostly a bottom six guy is the only reason he doesn't get more than a B. But he has so many good things.
Let's move along with our Bs here. We got Luke Evangelista coming in with the B. Definitely had another stepping stone type of season. I think he moved his game forward. He showed a lot of really, really good signs this year. Showcased in spurts and in sparks. He showcased that offensive talent, raw offensive talent that he possesses. I thought his all-around game got a little bit better, but there were at times, the reason why I can't put him on that A level is because there were times where his size worked at his disadvantage and he got bullied off the puck a little bit too much. When he played against those big physically imposing teams, I felt like he was kind of erased from the mix a little bit. And that's just that he's just going to have to keep growing into his physical style to make it against those more those bigger, harder bruising types of teams. But still give him a B for sure.
Yeah.
Alexander Carrier, I put him as a B just because he had a great defensive season.
Yeah.
We would still love to see his offense show a little bit more. I would like to see his offense go to the next level because we know he has that talent. Alexander Carrier is a puck-moving offensive style defenseman, but really where he shined last year was in his defensive metrics.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, even by the eye test, you could tell he was playing well defensively. Although, again, part of what's preventing him from getting an A is because the offensive side, wasn't as good. And I dare say it's been a little disappointing that he hasn't fully unlocked that side of his game, despite it being such strength of his. I would have expected at this point, that he would take a step there. And again, that's kind of why he finds himself as an unrestricted free agent after this year. It's part of it. Yeah.
So what about, okay, so Max, you made a big case to put Jeremy Lauzon in as one of the players who got a B. So go into your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and again, I've said many times about Lauzon, and everyone pretty much has as well. There's not a point of Lauzon's game that didn't take a step forward this year. Defensively, physically, obviously, he had the NHL's hits record. That's a factor too. Every part of his game became more refined and disciplined, but kind of like Carrier, big part of the reason he's not higher is because the offensive side, again, not a huge deal for Lauzon because isn't really part of his game, may never be. But the offensive side of his game definitely limits what he's capable of and what kind of grade he's capable of getting on a list like this.
I mean, the fact that he set the all-time hits record for a single season makes you think he might have deserved an A, but couldn't go that far.
Yeah, couldn't quite go that far either.
So I gave Kevin Lankinen a B, and I gave him a B because he played his role really, really well as a backup goalie. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't perfect. He had a couple bad ones. He had a couple snoozers. He wasn't like he didn't have every game where he was just locked in all the time. So I couldn't put him on the A level, but he was definitely a very quality backup, and he served his role, and he served it well as a backup. Yeah,
and we expect him to do that. And it's going to be, and we're going to talk a second, it's going to be a pretty big mystery to see what happens with him depending on what happens with UC Saros.
And Kevin Lankinen and UC Saros, their primary goalie stats are basically mirror each other. Their goals against average and their save percentage were basically the same. So the fact that Lankinen matched the player, the goalie he backs up, I mean, that's pretty impressive. So I had to give Lankinen a B. And here are the C's that we have. So probably a little bit of an unpopular opinion. People were like, how are you going to give Saros a C but Lankinen a B when they had the same stats? And again, it's about playing your role. And I know I was one of the biggest defenders of Saros. I think Saros got way too much criticism at certain points when the Preds were not playing their best when it comes to defense. But Saros is a franchise goalie. We know how good he is. We know he's one of the top 3 goalies in the league when he's on. And unfortunately, when you hold a player like him to that high of a standard, he didn't live up to it this year. He didn't steal enough games for us. He didn't go into those. He didn't go on too many occasions. He did not go into those modes, those like beast modes where you just steal games that you have no business winning. He didn't really do that as much as I would have liked to have seen him do this past year. So that's why I had to give him a C.
I might have been, a little, I don't want to say emotional on Saros. I thought about bumping him down to a C myself. I gave him a B ultimately because he definitely did bounce back, in the second half of the season when the Preds got their legs under them, went on that big streak. And even in the streak in November and December, he really had his legs under him as well. But you're absolutely right. He definitely had a down year for what we know he's capable of. You're right. He didn't steal enough games. And Saros is one of those players that you expect to be in the A category, but he wasn't. So,
yeah, definitely. And then our other ones we got, I mean, it's probably going to be unpopular, but I mean, are you in agreement with me, Max, that for when it comes to our younger core like Juuso Parssinen and Cody Glass, it was tough years for these guys. I mean, I'm not saying it's all their fault, and maybe they were a little mismanaged, and Cody Glass in particular was a healthy scratch too many times probably, and it was hard for him he dealt with injuries. But I had to give Juuso Parssinen and Cody Glass both a C this past year.
I gotta say, I didn't put Parssinen and Glass on my list mainly because they didn't play enough games, I guess, was my thing. But I gotta be very honest. Especially, I don't know necessarily for Parssinen, but for Glass, I give him a D or an F.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to be nice. I mean, honestly,
yeah,
because there were things. Well, the reason why I can't give Glass an F and I can't even give him a D is because there were things that happened that he had no control over.
Affected him.
And there were times during the season where I thought he was unfairly a healthy scratch and he should have been playing. I can't put that on him.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair though, I honestly wonder if it's bigger issues with Glass than just him as a player. So you remember what Andrew Brunette said at the end of the season, basically saying Glass lost his mojo and he's gonna have to come back with a reason to play and make this roster. Like he pretty much said like he's on thin ice right now.
So the reason why I keep getting distracted is because I guess I'll let everyone see the newest edition of the Catfish and Ice family. It's So everyone hi to Sophia. He is the reason that I'm getting distracted right now during this podcast is because she is deciding to chew on everything. So this sweet girl right here is going to be the mascot of next season for the Preds. So let's make it happen.
What kind of dog is she? I don't think I ever asked you.
That's why I keep getting distracted, guys.
What kind of dog is she? I don't think I ever asked you.
So she's actually definitely a mixed breed, but she's mostly a blue heeler. Wow. If anyone knows what blue heelers are. Yeah.
I've never heard of that, I must admit.
You got to look up blue heelers. They're great dogs. They're really smart dogs. They're task oriented. That's why she's getting into so much trouble right now is because I'm not paying attention to her. And so she's going to find stuff to do. If I don't give her something to do, she will find something to do. So that's what she's doing right now.
How big is she going to be?
So we think probably about 40 pounds, maybe 50 pounds tops. Yeah, a good medium-sized dog. So my last dog that was 15 that I moved down here to Florida with, he made it to 15 years old. He was a blue heeler as well. So just kind of the luck of the draw that I ended up with another blue heeler.
My family, we're a big mini dachshund family, and those things are tiny.
Oh yeah.
My sister just got one, and hers is about 8 months old. Me personally, I don't want to have a dog at this point. It's a lot of work. I do enough as having a job, and then I want to come home, watch the Preds play, and having a dog personally, it'd be great, but it'd also be a lot of responsibility for me personally.
Well, that's why I got the dog during the offseason, Max, because I figure by the time the Preds get back on the ice and they're playing hockey again, she'll be good to go. She'll be grown out of some of her puppy stuff that she's doing right now. But yeah, she's a good dog. Happy to have her. I had to give her an appearance on the podcast here. But anyway, all right. So yeah, player grades. Let's see. Justin Gambino says that Luke Shin got a D+ tops from Come on, Justin. I think you're being a little unfair here.
I don't think it's just Justin. I think a lot of people, and we've talked a little bit. I get where people are coming from with Luke Shen. I know he's slow. His main thing is just physicality. I understand, especially his start to the year was really rough, but I really thought that he got better. Again, he wasn't mistake-free by any means, but I thought he got better throughout the season, at least with the frequency of the errors he was making. He wasn't doing as much. And in the playoffs, honestly, I thought he was really solid.
I thought he was too. He definitely got better as the season went. I thought he was really good in the playoffs in terms of, again, playing his role.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff there. We got some other good people jumping in. I'm laughing at a comment that Matt just left. Uh-oh. Oh my God, dude. Matt, you're doing too much, man. So Chad, what's your opinion on COVID? Yeah, we're going to, I think if anybody wants to go do that research for themselves, they can go ahead and jump on my timeline, but we're not going to talk about it on this podcast. But hey, you got jokes, Matt. I love you, man. I love you. Good stuff. Love it. Let's get back to our grades here. Yeah, good stuff. All right. So yes. So, what about Juuso Parssinen? I thought it was a really kind of a rough year for him as well. I do love that he's getting to play for the Admirals right now in the playoffs, because he's the type of player that I think is fully capable of storming back next year, and next year can be his breakout year, his true breakout year. He hit some rough patches this past year. He kind of had he had a long stretches before he got sent to Milwaukee. He had some long stretches where he was pretty irrelevant. He wasn't doing a lot of the right things in the game. And so Andrew Burnett identified that, said, you're going to get way more benefits out of going to play with the Admirals, and look at what he's getting out of it. He's getting to play playoff hockey right now. Whereas if they would have kept him on the Preds and kept him too long, he would have missed out all that time. He could have been playing on the Admirals. So, but I get Parssinen a C as well for his time he did play on the team this past year.
I would say probably C, maybe a D with Parssinen. And here's my thoughts. Here's why I'm not as harsh with them as I'm with Glass, is because I wonder, and there's going to be maybe this is me being a little harsh on him, but I almost wonder, because Parssinen was not like a highly touted guy in the draft. He was a 7th round pick. I wonder if last year did his start, maybe the way we hyped him up, maybe make us think he's capable of more than he really was? Because again, he's a really physical guy. I personally see him, if he's going to be in the NHL, I see him being more of a bottom 6 guy long term. I don't really see him being a top 6 guy, and he might could prove me wrong. I just don't think that's what he's going to be long term. But someone like Glass is a former 6th overall pick. Like, we have expectations for you. Like, you got to really be a star. But for someone like Parssinen, it's a little more understandable if he's not going to break into that true top 6 role, because maybe with him being a 7th round pick, we might have hyped him up a little bit more than we should have earlier.
Yeah. So those are our player grades there. Take them as you will. Of course, we got some other obvious players that I even gave Tyson Barrie a C. I guess I was just feeling really nice with my grades. I didn't feel like anybody deserved a D or an F, really. So I got to put Tyson Barrie on the C as well. We keep thinking he's on his way out, and he's going to be go this offseason.
And he will.
Yeah, so he gets a C from me as well. I gave Dante Fabro a C, though, and I'm sure
I did too. And
I think some people. I don't think people are going to like that. I think a lot. So I'm probably going to get some pushback on that one. I think a lot of people would probably want to give him a B. But
it's weird because when he did play, he was really solid. But he didn't play enough. He didn't play enough.
He didn't set himself apart enough to be in the starting lineup. Whether you think that's fair or not, clearly he didn't do enough. So
and that's the thing. It's like, we can sit here watching the games ourselves and think, why is he not playing? But like, obviously there's something Brunette and Barry Trotz saw. They didn't want to play him. And it's like, at some point we got to see results.
Yeah, true. All right, let's segue into our next topic here for the Preds, and that is looking ahead to next season with us watching the Admirals go deep in the Calder Cup playoffs. Mentioned at the beginning of the episode that you only saw one prospect make their NHL debut last year for the Preds, and that was Mark Del Gaizo, with some really promising results in his time he did play for the Preds last year. So it makes us wonder. We've got some really talented prospects who are really getting close to making that Preds debut. It's just a matter of when, not if. And so that's what inspires this next topic. I got 3 prospects, Max, who I think have really, really good chances.
I wonder. I have 3 too. I wonder if they're going to have the same 3 prospects.
Let's start with the most obvious one. Let's start with the most obvious one. It's the one that everyone is taking notice on, and that's, of course, Zachary Leroux.
Yep. That's exactly right.
He's got the tenacity to make it to the next level. He's got the physicality. He plays with an edginess to him that's going to serve him very, very well in the NHL. But it can also be his biggest weakness. And we've always said, what are we worried about with Zachary Leroux? We're worried about him keeping his emotions in check. He can't be taking those 5-minute majors. He can't be constantly sitting in the box and putting his team in bad situations.
Can't have that.
It's a very delicate, fine line you have to walk with when you're coaching a player like Zachary Leroux, because his biggest strength can also be his biggest weakness. So I think it's a virtual lock that he's going to make his Preds debut next year.
I definitely think sometime next year he will. And it's the issue has not been completely eliminated, but from what it seemed like, and from what I know from people I definitely trust who watch the Admirals a lot, he's cleaned it up a little bit. Again, he has not eliminated it, but he's definitely gotten better with his taking penalties and going to the NHL level. Look, it's going to happen at least a time or two, probably more than that, but it's going to be one of those things that he's just got to learn. And if you're the team, you're going to have to take that risk. And I guess, this current regime didn't draft him, but still, he's still in the system and they're going to want to bring him up, but they're not going to be dumb. They're going to know that he's going to, have these things happen. Doesn't mean he's not going to suffer the consequences for it. But again, it's just going to happen. It's one of those things that we're going to have to live with if we're going to be calling him up.
Yeah. So Squeegee Dude on YouTube, who is our friend CJ, jumps in and says, Afanasyev, Stastny, Del Gaizo, Askarov, and Leroux are the guys I can see up next year. Leroux might start in the AHL, but he'll be called up midway. So all those other guys have already made their Preds debut. So this is, for the sake of this segment, we're only doing players who have not made their NHL debut yet. But yes, Igor Afanasyev is still technically a raw prospect. He has not played very much in the NHL yet. Yeah. So he's another player that has to be on your radar next season. But we're just talking about players who still have to make their debut. So, I don't know if he's still leading the Calder Cup playoffs in goals because I haven't checked in the last 2 games. But I know after game 1 of the conference finals, Zach Leroux was leading the Calder Cup playoffs in goals. And he did score in game 1. I have not checked what he did in game 2 or tonight yet. But what's so amazing about what Leroux's doing right now is people forget this is his first season in the AHL. I mean, that is a really, really difficult transition to make, to go from his junior level leagues where he was really good, but he was going through all those misconducts and all the stuff. And he piled up the penalty minutes this year, but he avoided the really bad disciplinary penalties. Most of his penalties this year is just his style of play. He gets in a lot of fights. But that's fine. You don't want to take that away from him.
Everyone knew that when he was drafted. And again, it's one of those areas where you took the commitment saying you're going to have to improve that and work with him. That's not news.
So Leroux's got 2 more years left on his entry-level contract. And so he'll be waivers exempt if he is called up next year. So you always have to keep that in mind.
That's huge.
You don't ever have to feel like you have to. No one's advocating that we have to rush Leroux into but teams do like to every now and then see what they got in their really high performing prospects. Yep. It doesn't mean you're going to keep them up for the entire season, but you want to see what you got. And I think Zachary Leroux leads the list of prospects that you're like, okay, we got to see what this guy can do in the NHL next year. We can't
say he doesn't turn out to be like a big top 6 guy. I very much think he'll be at least bottom 6 with his physicality and what he brings. Like, he would probably eat on our 4th line.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not right now, but like his style of play is meant to thrive. Like, imagine a line of Smith, McCarron, and Leroux.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Don't even get me started on that. Well, and see, like, we have to wait and see what happens in the offseason and which players are lost before we really know if there's any space for Leroux to even make an impact right at the beginning of the season, right out of training camp. Let's go to my next one that I got. What about Joakim Kimmel?
That was one I had as well. Yep.
So, I mean, he has been a fast riser through the Preds prospect pool. We know he's got a really elite shot to him. And again, he is playing his first year in the AHL, just like Zachary Leroux is. And before that, all of his time was outside of North America. All of his time was in Finland, his native country. So it's his first time getting full-time AHL duty, and he got 16 goals and 41 points. That is impressive. That is very impressive.
It's crazy.
So, he's making things happen during these playoffs. He is not as much of a lock for me to make his debut next year as Leroux is. I don't know if Kimmel is as NHL ready as Leroux is. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
The vibe definitely seems like there's definitely still more work to be done with him before he's ready to get to the NHL.
I think Kimmel's definitely a more niche player. He's got a raw talent with his shot that I think you would love to see him test that on the NHL level if the opportunity presents itself next year. But I think Leroux's definitely got the bigger body of work to be ready to make that NHL jump before.
Also, another thing is, like, with Leroux, he can be kind of like one of those tweeners. Like, maybe he goes top 6, maybe bottom 6. He's probably good for anything. But with Kimmel, you really want him being in a top 6 role. And of course, you're not just going to necessarily. You probably won't start like just right away top 6, but like you definitely have in mind thinking, grand scheme of things, top 6 or bust with Joakim Kimmel.
Since we're getting into the prospect talk here, let's get this comment in from Johnny on YouTube. He says, Askarov has to have a good camp. I didn't like how his season is ending with the Ads playoff run.
Johnny's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, a little bit of a red flag how the playoffs have gone for Askarov. Yeah. We got to see what happens here. It's starting to look more and more like the Preds are going to do everything they can to re-sign Saros long-term, which means Kevin Lankinen's gone, which means the door is wide open most likely for Askarov to be the backup next year. But he's got to show that he's ready to take on that very important role of being a backup. Yeah, you can't have a liability in your backup goalie. You can't. You got to have someone you can turn to and trust, like Kevin Lankinen's been. Yeah. Let's get to another prospect I got. This one's a dark horse. Okay. This is by no means a prediction. This is by no means me saying it's going to happen. But I think it would be cool. This prospect has really just been pinging on my radar for the past couple months. Ryan Ufko.
Interesting one. Yeah.
This guy, you look at how he's playing, what he's doing. The Nashville Predators official website just put out a really good article that everyone should go read. I read it today on Ryan Ufko and his journey from the college ranks to what he's doing now with the Admirals. All 3 of these prospects are in different points in their hockey journeys, but they're all getting their first taste of Admirals action in the AHL, and they're all playing very important roles. And Ryan Ufko, his highlight reel is just so fun to watch. The dude is
a playmaker. He had a cannon of a shot.
He's a playmaker. He is the definition of an offensive defenseman for sure. And he has so much confidence. He really does. Like, he plays with so much confidence. Let's get a trade. Let's get a trade package offer from Matt. Matt on YouTube says trade Saros and Tomasino to New Jersey for the 10th overall pick and Dawson Mercer.
If we're throwing Tomasino in there, give us like maybe a 3rd round pick as well.
But hey, Max, I really like where Matt's going with that. I like that trade. I would take that in a heartbeat.
I want a little, again, I probably want like another third of throwing Tomasino in there. My proposal, and this is probably really far-fetched, and this is probably, I'm sure it's not going to happen, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I said Saros and Nyquist for Jesper Bratt, Seamus Casey, their defensive prospect, and a third-round pick.
I really like Dawson Mercer, and I really like that 10th overall pick.
Yeah.
Love it, Matt. I would take that trade and run with it if I was if that came across my desk and I was Barry Trotz, I would take that and run with it. I wouldn't even think twice about it. I know, an extra draft pick would sweeten the deal for sure. And I think if you wanted to negotiate, you could probably get an extra draft pick out of the Devils because they're pretty desperate right now to get a goalie.
Yeah.
So you could definitely wheel and deal and maybe throw in.
I think if you're throwing Tomasino in there, you got to get at least another, like even if maybe a low end prospect or a draft pick, you got to get another. I think you got to get another like asset in there of some sort.
Okay.
In my opinion,
we'll have plenty more time to do off-season trade talks for sure. But anyways, get back to Ufko, my dark horse that could maybe make his Preds debut. Definitely not a player I think has to play next year. Don't twist my words. There's going to be someone out there who thinks, oh, yeah, Chad's already trying to push this poor kid into the NHL. No, I'm just saying that sometimes you see these talented prospects and you want to let them test the waters. So going back to Ufko, very impressive how quickly he's picked up his success in the AHL. A 2021 fourth-round pick by the Predators, played in 9 regular season games for the Admirals, and is playing vital minutes in the Calder Cup playoffs right now. He hasn't shown any signs of being a slow learner. Not at all. I mean, the dude's picking everything up really quick. Just as Matt is saying here on YouTube again, Ufko is Ellis Light.
Maybe saying a lightweight version of Ellis. I guess is that what you're saying?
I think it's a good thing. I think he's saying that's a good thing. Ryan Ellis was really good in his peak. Captain of UMass in the college ranks, Ufko put up 26 points in 37 games. It's so hard to really grade players in college.
Oh, it's measuring
such a different world.
You can't do it.
But the only reason I think that there's an outside chance that there's going to be opportunities. There's going to be opportunities for someone like Ryan Ufko to maybe scratch their way into the NHL for just a few games next year is, again, let's go back to the right side of that defense.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
You look at the uncertainty of Alexander Carrier plus Tyson Berry being gone, and wait for it. Guess what that leaves us with on our right side right now? Luke Shen and Dante Fabro. Jeremy Lauzon can, of course, move back and forth, so maybe he ends up playing the right side next year. But I do not like that. I don't like that.
And who knows that they don't use Fabro in a trade? I mean, you don't know. That very well could happen.
So there's going to be a really big, massive hole on the right side of the defense next year unless the Preds go out and make a splash in free agency, which is certainly possible. I think they will. I think they will too.
I think they're definitely going to target a right-handed defenseman in the summer. I
think they have to. But I would not discount Ryan Ufko getting a taste of the NHL next year. It's not nearly as high of a probability as the first two guys we talked about just now, but keep watching Ryan Ufko. He was signed to his 3-year ELC contract this past March, which gave him the opportunity to get the valuable playing time with the Admirals this year in their playoff run, which was, again, a really good move by the front office to get him to sign that 3-year ELC so that he could play with the Admirals and get these minutes. So good stuff there. Some honorable mention prospects that you have, Max, that maybe I didn't bring up. I got a couple. But these I don't really think are going to play in the NHL next year, but they're still worth talking about. Tanner Molendyk, drafted last year, has a lot of the same qualities as Roman Josi. He plays the same way. Still a lot we have to learn about Tanner Molendyk, but he's done really well in his other leagues since he got drafted, playing 56 points in 50 games in 4 total seasons in the WAHL. It would take a rash of injuries and a down year where the Predators are out of the playoff race and calling up younger players to get experience for us to see Molendyk come anywhere close to making an NHL debut next year. But we could see him with the Admirals. What about Fedor Svechkov? He's one I left off.
I was going to ask about too. That was one I was thinking it's got to be close.
He would be number 4 on my list.
Yeah,
he's definitely worth talking about as far as making his NHL debut. We're getting a lot of Ufko talk from the comments here, which I like. Squeegee Dude says, can't wait to see Ufko full-time next year in Milwaukee. This series against Coachella, he is showing he has some growth to do. Made some big mistakes tonight, but he will learn and grow. Fair enough. And yeah, I mean, when you're talking about such a raw player like Ufko who just came out of the college ranks, yeah, there's going to be some growing pains for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, Fedor Svechkov, he's an interesting one too, because I feel like he has shown a lot more promise in his offensive side of his game because that was the biggest knock on Svechkov when he was drafted, was that he's a really quality two-way defense or two-way forward. He plays the right way. He's very fundamentally sound, but he doesn't have that offensive pop, that high offensive ceiling that you would like to see from some of these forwards that you draft high in the draft. But he has shown a lot of promise. He's got a great hockey IQ. I don't know how close he is to making it to the NHL, but he made his Admirals debut in 2023-24 as well and put up 39 points and 16 goals. I think that's really positive returns for a player like Svechkov, who many said his offensive game is not that impressive. So he just turned 21 in April and has 2 years left on his ELC. So much like these other prospects we've talked about, he's getting really, really close. But at the same time, you don't have to rush him either.
Yeah, absolutely not.
All right, so that's our prospects who can make a Preds debut next year. Max, we're going to cover a few more things here on episode 234. But Max, I want to make sure we touch on your great article you wrote.
Yeah.
It's been published tonight. It's actually up live tonight on Predlines.com about entertaining a trade for Trevor Zegras. Let's just update everyone on what's going on with that. It seems like the two sides are not happy with each other. It looks like Trevor Zegras needs a change of scenery. He's coming off a really, really down year with the Ducks. And, it's still speculation at this point. What I read, Max, and you can correct me, but the GM of the Ducks he's denied that Zegras is on the trade block, but everyone seems to think he probably is. So kind of tell us why you think that the Preds could target Zegras in a trade.
Yeah, no, I think when a guy like Zegras, I think is so rare to be on the market, and a team like the Preds absolutely has to take advantage because he's the kind of guy who he's really young. I believe he's 23 years old, whatever he is, he's really young and he has a lot of room to grow. That being said, he has 2 years of 60 plus points under his belt, which I know points are not everything. And there's still a basic box score of goals and assists, hits, whatever, doesn't cut it nowadays or really ever. But that at least shows me you're capable of playing in this league. That's what at least I can figure out from a guy who scores 60 points. And with all the talent he has, the playmaking abilities, the shot, everything, he has a chance to be a legit one center for a team. And a team, let's face it, for a team like the Predators, they may never get a guy like that in the draft. And seeing a guy like Zegras on the market, I think you've got to take advantage. And also a great thing about Zegras is he's under contract for next year and the year after, $5 million, and he's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of that. So he's not even going to hit unrestricted free agency. The Preds are going to have control over him for a long time if they trade for him. And they have assets to play with. And I said in the article, the title of the article, not just pursue a trade for Zegras, but aggressively pursue it. And I don't mean trade everything you have, of course, but you have assets to play with. You have prospects. You have a boatload of picks in the draft. You have 3 second-rounders this year. You have 2 first-rounders next year, and your first-rounder this year is only the 22nd overall pick. Why wouldn't you want to part with that? And Anaheim's GM, and I mentioned in the article, that one of the things they said they're looking for is a top 4 right-handed defenseman. Well, Dante Fabro. Again, I know the right side of defense takes a hit, which means the Preds would for sure have to go out and get another right-handed defenseman or multiple, or potentially lock themselves into re-signing Carrier. But you have that asset to make a trade work. You got a guy like Cody Glass who very well may need to change the scenery. And heck, the Ducks maybe want a little more. You got more things to offer. That's a deal right there where if I'm Trotz, the upside is tremendous with Trevor Zegras, and the downside, even if Zegras did absolutely awful and the Preds just didn't even give him a qualifying offer after the next year of his contract, 2025-26, I believe it is. Well, you have enough assets in your system already. It's really not going to hurt you that badly. Make the move, and guess what? You're not going to get this Preds team anywhere by just playing it safe.
So where
look
would you
into it and make that
where
move.
would you fit Trevor Zegras in a starting lineup for the Preds?
Second line
Would he be?
center.
What's that?
Second line center.
Oh
So
yeah,
Forrest O'Reilly stays as your top line center.
yeah.
And also Zegras, a guy like Zegras,
And
he's
that's assuming that your Nyquist trade idea falls through and Nyquist is on the team next
not
year.
necessarily. Not necessarily.
All right.
No, I still think there's ways that this can happen. And for a guy like Zegras, if you can learn from a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, that could help take his game to the next level.
I'll say I love this idea from you. I really do, Max. But one thing I gotta say, man, it's shaping up to be a very, very active offseason for the Preds. They've got like you just said it, Max. They got so many assets to move. We know that Barry Trotz is hungry. He's not going to sit idly. He's not gonna just stick with the status quo and just hope everything works out again next year. No, he's hungry. He saw this team get this taste of success. They overperformed. They laid a dud in the first round. Their offense fizzled out. They couldn't find it. So now Barry Trotz, in his mind's thinking, I got my blueprint here. We saw what worked. I know I got the right head coach. I got a top line. Even if they trade Nyquist, they'd have to fix that.
But that's my idea anyway.
but the point is, Trotz has a blueprint now, but he knows that this team's missing some pieces, still some significant pieces. So that's only going to make him more and more aggressive this offseason to find those pieces. I know that some people don't like that idea, but you can kiss the whole rebuild thing goodbye. I don't think Trotz is entertaining anything about a rebuild anymore. Not after what this team just did this past year, overperforming.
Maybe not the traditional kind of rebuild, but Trotz has said, he said before, I'm not going to sacrifice the future, and trading for a guy like Trevor Zegras, that's a move for the present.
No, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can still facilitate the youth while also putting a Stanley Cup playoff caliber team out there again, and not only a Stanley Cup caliber team, but a team that can actually be dynamic. And it's so frustrating that you take that first round loss to the Canucks when the Canucks were one of the worst offensive teams too. The two worst offensive teams took on each other in the first round of the playoffs. So if the Preds could have even found half of their offense, they would have been the ones advancing. They would have been the ones playing the Oilers. Now that probably would have ended very ugly once they played the Oilers, but at least we would have had that to hang our hats on, that they finally broke the first round curse. They're right there. They're right there. I love this idea though of Zegras. I really do.
That series against Canucks would have gone to a seventh game if not for that terrible game 4. But I'm not going to go too far on that.
We've already dwelled on that too much. But I love it, man. Good stuff there. All right, last thing we're going to hit on, most impressive wins of this past season. And it was another list that I put out there that people can go look at. Put it out there a few weeks ago. But yeah, some really impressive wins this past year, beating some really quality opponents. What are some ones that stick out to you most, Max? I'll start with mine.
And you'll definitely notice a trend with mine because a lot of mine are around the same time. But I would say number one of them was that win at home in November against Colorado, down 3-2 in final minute of the third, and you scored twice in the final minute of regulation to win it 4-3.
That one's on my list. So I actually ranked mine.
I didn't rank mine. So
I ranked mine in my article.
I will say one of these wins is clearly the top versus the rest.
Okay. So let me go from number 5 to number 1 for my personal list for my best wins for the Preds. And when I say best, I mean like most impressive. Considering the style of the way you won, considering who you beat, all the elements, all the factors. Number 5 for me was on December 15th when the Preds beat the Hurricanes 6-5 in overtime. If you remember that game, that was a roller coaster.
I thought about putting that on there, but I didn't quite.
The Predators were 16-13-0 at this point in the season, so they had kind of navigated through that rocky start that we all expected them to do when we saw this new collection of a team thrown together. We figured they were going to start slow. But they take on the Carolina Hurricanes on December 15th here, and it was just one of those roller coaster, fast-paced types of games. And So the Predators had to go in comeback mode here. Yeah, I mean, the Predators opened up the Hurricanes had a 4-2 lead in this game, and then they had a 5-3 lead at the midway point of regulation. And I remember watching that game thinking the Hurricanes are just too much, man. Like they have too much firepower. We're not going to be able to keep up. This game's over. Put this game on ice. It's over. They're not going to be able to they're not going to score 3 more goals to get to 6 goals and win this game. But guess what? They did. 3 unanswered goals by the Predators in this game against the Hurricanes. Philip Forsberg would notch the overtime winner, putting him at 16 goals through the first 30 games. So that's my number 5 on the list.
Yep.
Number 4 of my most impressive wins was when the Preds beat the Golden Knights 5-4 in overtime.
That wasn't your number 1?
No. Okay, are you going to let me finish my list?
I guess, man. That's only your number 4?
No, number 4, yeah.
I guess you rank them differently. Like I kind of rank a lot. I won't. You can finish the rest of your list. I kind of rank some of mine on how like thrilling a lot of these wins were.
Well, I get it, but mine, my factor was more just the overall body of work of how impressive the win was. Not any outside factors. Not that it was the 18. The record point streak was hit 18 games. That's cool, but I'm more on just the win itself and how impressive it was.
Makes sense.
So both teams at this point were battling for the wild card. The Golden Knights were up 3-0 in the first period.
4-1 at the end of the second.
Looked like it was over before the fans even broke the seal from their first beer. Down 4-1 in the third period. The rally started and ended with the top line going to work. So this is, Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, Philip Forsberg. They took over this game.
Yep.
Nyquist was tied on the power play 40 seconds later after Philip Forsberg scored his 40th goal of the year. And 40 seconds into overtime, Roman Josi would complete the comeback and send the Predators to their 43rd win and significantly closer to clinching their postseason berth. The point streak would sadly end the following game against the Arizona Coyotes. Okay. My number three. Max is already like, how could there be anything better than that? All right, I'm about to tell you.
All right.
Number 3, Preds go toe-to-toe with arch rival Dallas and get the 4-3 win. Going back to the 2023 preseason predictions, I always held the Dallas Stars as one of my top Stanley Cup picks. But this game on January 6th on the road in Dallas, the Predators made a significant statement with the midway point of the regular season approaching. They had a 2-0 lead. So this is the opposite of making a comeback. This was a game where the Predators had to hold on for dear life, knowing damn well that the Dallas Stars were going to make their comeback. And they did. The Stars tied it at 2 going into the third period. I remember watching that game very vividly and thinking when the Stars tied it at 2, I thought the Predators were going to fold. I thought they were going to lose that game in the third period. Really did. And it was going to be one of those moral type victories where in the postgame you're thinking, man, we had a great team like Dallas down against the ropes and we just didn't put them away. But not on this particular occasion, and that's why it's number 3 on my list, Max, is because when I see a team dig deep, and I take the quality of opponent very, very high up in my factors when I'm ranking these best wins. But Philip Forsberg came to the rescue and did what a superstar players are expected to do, perform in clutch moments. And that's what he did in this game. So Forsberg would have 2 goals in this game. Ryan O'Reilly assisting on both. Kevin Lankinen would finish with 26 saves. And the Nashville-Dallas rivalry has been steadily growing in intensity since the 2019 first-round elimination. So anytime you can beat them on their home ice, it's going to make a list for best wins for me.
Yep, makes sense.
Number 2 is the shutout against these Florida Panthers who are in the Stanley Cup Final.
As well. Yep.
It's so hard to get shutouts in today's NHL. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the San Jose Sharks. It's hard to get shutouts in this league. Sorry, did not mean to send a stray over to the Sharks. Didn't mean to do that. But it's hard to get a shutout against anybody is my point. March 21st, not all that long ago, 3-0 shutout against the Florida Panthers.
At their place, by the way,
at their place. That was another game where you kept thinking the Panthers were going to break it open. It did not feel like a shutout.
No,
the Panthers had so many chances in that game, but that was during the point streak. That was during the 18-game point streak. Panthers would have 33 shots on goal, not against UC Saros, but this was Kevin Lankinen's shutout to be had.
Nice. Remember,
the Predators also blocked 16 shots in this game and killed off both Panthers power plays. It was sound defensive hockey and even better goaltending. I mean, it was another tremendous game from the top line. The top line took over in this game as well. And the Panthers were basically a top 10 scoring team this past year. They were 11th in the league in goals per game. And they gave up just 2.41 goals per game. And so you're talking, you beat them against their average in terms of how many goals they give up per game, and you shut them out. That's number 2. For me, that's more impressive than the Golden Knights overtime win. Now, the Golden Knights overtime win was more thrilling, as you would say, Max. It was definitely more thrilling. But just in terms of how impressive and difficult the wins are, I think this 3-0 shutout against the Panthers.
I was probably a little biased on that Golden Knights win because I was in the building that night. And yeah, unreal.
All right, Johnny jumps in with a submission for one of his best wins.
Johnny's absolutely right, and that was on my list as well.
The Black Friday road win in St. Louis, that was delicious. What was that? 8-3. And then Squeegee Dude says, how about that glass hat trick game against Colorado? 5-1.
That was on my list as well, and I was also in the building for that, which was incredible.
So my number 1 on my list is also against the Avalanche. An improbable comeback for the ages against the Avalanche. So this was early in the season, of course. The Predators were 6-10-0 on the year. And, I mean, we all remember this. The Colorado Avalanche were next up on the schedule, and we were thinking you can't have two teams more different and more further apart. You got the Preds, who are still new, still learning how to play with each other, and all this stuff, a new head coach, all these things. No way they're going to be able to handle the Colorado Avalanche this early in the season, a team who's got legit Stanley Cup expectations. But this game was one of those games. So if anyone remembers, this was when Yakov Trenin scored the game winner in regulation.
Who ironically ended up on the Colorado Avalanche later that year.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, this was crazy. So 19:22 of the third period was when Forsberg would score. Then just 22 seconds remaining and overtime looking likely, Yakov Trenin, of all people, would stun the Avalanche in regulation. That was the game where we talked about it, Max. Wasn't that where the home announcer for the Avalanche was like,
oh my God, yeah. Yeah, the stupid-ass rink.
Yeah, he blamed the rink, and he went full homer mode.
That was clearly ridiculous, but whatever.
So, Max, that's my number one, just because the fact that you scored 2 goals in the last 60 seconds to not only beat the Avalanche, but you didn't even let them get an overtime point.
Right.
You were like, you know what? You went from cruising to 2 points to getting 0 points, all in a span of 40 seconds.
Yeah. I remember that game, I clearly saw the game myself. That game, the Preds were playing really well at third period. It was looking like one of those games where it's going to be like, look, you couldn't get the win, but you played really, really well. You could hang your hat on that. But no, you came back and you won that game in regulation. That was crazy.
Yeah. There's definitely some other good wins on the year. Of course, you had the 18-game point streak, but I
do want to talk about also that CJ said that home game in March against Colorado, where that was the game where the winning streak, because this is before like the point streak at this point. This was still when the winning streak was happening. The winning streak at this point hit 8 games after that. And that was one of those games where I thought, you won 7 games in a row. You're playing the Avalanche. It's been a good run, but it's going to be really hard to win 8 in a row against them. And especially because I was going through a game, it's going to be that much more difficult to get the win there. But thankfully, that last part about me ending the game was. And I think
when you look at some of these wins that we just talked about, that's what really gives you hope going into next season is the body of work of this team. They beat some really, really good teams this past year.
Sure.
And it wasn't like they just had a couple fluke wins. You know, during an 82-game season, yeah, you're always going to have some fluke wins, but nothing about the Predators were a fluke this past year. They battled through adversity. They really took a lot of growth together as a team, and Andrew Brunette has that team playing hard for him. He's clearly was the right hire by Barry Trotz.
Oh, yeah. He was a Coach of the Year nominee for a reason.
But when you look at the quality of all these wins, yeah, it didn't end the way we wanted it. The first round was another tough exit. And I know people rightfully so want way more than just to make the playoffs. But just off this season alone, you look at the quality of the wins, you look at how they beat some of these really good teams, you got to say we are definitely heading right back in the right direction again, this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, the culture is certainly, I mean, it's only after 1 year of the new regime, but it certainly looks like from a culture standpoint, this team is turning things around. And that's the biggest thing. When you can nail down the culture from the top down, you can do so many things. And I fully believe in Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette to get this team to where, I mean, based on this year, there's nothing to suggest that these guys aren't the ones to lead this team. You know, they look like studs right now.
You definitely have to build off of it, though. You don't want to revert back.
Yeah,
because then that's when people will start questioning it. That's when people will start thinking, okay, that first year was a fluke. You got to build off of it. You got to do something even more special. Yeah. And, you know, of course, the next step is winning a playoff series. That really is the next measuring stick. And to do that, you're going to have a really good offseason. That's where Barry Trotz comes in. So Barry Trotz, he's on the clock now. He really is. It's his time to shine. So we'll see what he has in store for this team this year during this offseason. Max, it's been great to get back with you for an episode. It's been awesome. So many great people in the comments tonight that we love. So happy to have you in. And we will be back in a week to do a new episode. Now that I'm settled in the new place, I got the Catfish and Ice logo in the back. I got the new dog. I got the mascot for the podcast now. So we're ready to go, Max.
Oh, yeah.
I'll see you soon. I'll see everybody soon. This has been episode 234 of Catfish on Ice, brought to you by DraftKings. We'll see you later.
See you guys later.